Emily Carter thought she'd finally found peace. The little Victorian at the edge of Rockport, Oregon, smelled of cedar and sea air, with just enough quirks to make it theirs. She and Sophie painted the kitchen mint green, hung fairy lights on the porch, and rescued a skinny tabby cat from the local shelter they named Luna. The only blemish on their dream was the property next door, a half-renovated house abandoned mid-construction. Its skeletal frame faced their back garden with yawning windows like empty eye sockets. A fence once separated the 2 yards, but the owner had torn it out to install a new one and never finished the job. Now the gap between the properties felt like an open wound. Most evenings, Emily and Sophie sat in the yard drinking tea, letting Luna prowl under the hydrangeas. On their first night, Emily noticed a figure in the dark window of the abandoned house. A man standing perfectly still, watching them without blinking. No light behind him. No expression. Probably just curious, Sophie whispered, pulling her sweater tight. But when the man remained there for 30 minutes, silent and unblinking, they both went inside, locking the door. The days that followed seemed normal. Emily went to her freelance gigs. Sophie unpacked boxes. But unease crept into the cracks of the new life they were building. One warm evening, they sat outside again, stargazing, when the sound of wood scraping on concrete made Emily's stomach knot. 3 men stepped into their yard from the gap in the fence like they belonged there. One carried a black duffel bag. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, her voice thin. The youngest, maybe 29, smiled strangely and offered them a handful of dishwasher tablets still in a store sleeve. "Need any?" "No thanks," Emily said, forcing a laugh to break the tension. They left without another word. What chilled Emily wasn't the offer, but the entitlement, the way they drifted in and out as if her garden were a hallway. Over the next week, they kept returning. Sometimes they cut across the abandoned yard. Sometimes they lingered in Emily's, always silent, always staring. One afternoon, 2 police officers appeared, lifting the loose fence panel and looking around the empty lot before leaving without a word. It only deepened Emily's dread. A week later, Emily was in the bath when a crash rattled the back of the house. She rushed to find Sophie filming out the guest room window. "A man's in the garden," Sophie whispered. Emily peered out. A stranger she'd never seen before pointed at their bedroom window, then bolted toward the house, yanking the doorknob as he passed. He vanished back into the abandoned property, pounding on its windows with his fists. They called the police. Officers came, watched the video, and left. But that night at 2:16 a.m., a low whistle drifted through the darkness, the kind men used to catcall. Then came tapping on the glass. Their security cameras failed to record. The next morning, their Ring doorbell was on the ground, SD card missing. The harassment escalated until one night they checked the live feed and froze. A man in a black mask stood in their yard, arms outstretched like a grotesque crucifixion, head tilted back to stare at their window. He didn't move. He didn't speak loud enough for them to hear. After 30 seconds, he turned, crossed the street, and stood motionless facing their home for half an hour. Police said it wasn't illegal to stare. Emily and Sophie slept in shifts after that, jumpy at every sound. They kept the doors locked, cameras rolling, but the sense of powerlessness was overwhelming. When he appeared again, this time with a crowbar, another masked man at his side, Emily realized their nightmare had only begun. By late October, Denver's evenings snapped cold. Maya liked that. Breath fogging in the streetlight, a scarf she could tuck her face into, the 1,000 small rituals of anonymity. She wanted to be a stranger again. On Tuesday, she ducked into a narrow cafe with fogged windows and old tile. A barista about her age looked up and smiled like she'd been waiting. "Good morning, Sunflower." Maya blinked. It wasn't morning. And that word. Trent never called her honey or babe. He used pet names like instruments, and Sunflower was one he wielded when he was testing her boundaries. "Good morning, Sunflower." "You look upset again, Sunflower." Maya forced a smile, paid cash, and left the cup untouched. Maybe a coincidence, she told herself as she walked home. boots knocking the icy sidewalk. Denver was a city of overlapping scripts. People picked up phrases from podcasts, boyfriends, memes. The world recycled everything. 2 days later, a rideshare driver checked her in the mirror. "Ever figure out what you're running from?" he asked, lazy, like it was small talk. Every muscle in her shoulders clenched. Trent had said that once, leaning in, eyes flat as coins, as if the answer weren't hers to give. "Wrong person," Maya said, voice steady. The driver laughed like she'd told a joke. At the office, a coworker hummed a melody that used to pour from Trent's Bluetooth speaker whenever they argued. At a grocery store, a woman brushing past whispered, "You don't get to disappear." Maya threw out her coffee that night and scrubbed her hands until the smell of cinnamon syrups and steamed milk was gone. She told herself, coincidence. Then she flipped her phone, watched the black glass for a long time, and did not sleep. Maya didn't reach out to Trent. She texted his older sister, Erin, who once apologized to Maya in the hallway outside a Thanksgiving dinner none of them would forget. "Tell him to stop," Maya wrote. "I don't know how he's doing it, but it needs to end." Erin replied the next morning, "Trent's in rehab. 6 weeks, no phone. I'm not covering for him. I'm tired, too." A week later, Erin posted a photo, Trent pale, holding a chip. The timestamp matched the rehab timeline. Maya stared at the screen long enough for her reflection to look like a stranger's. If not Trent, then who and why those exact words? Memory offered a breadcrumb. A night months before the breakup, Trent praising a community where people shared scripts for productivity, negotiation, behavioral nudges. He never named it. He smirked, said you had to be invited. She remembered the way he said scripts, like theater. Maya stayed late at work to avoid her empty apartment, then walked home with her headphones in and no music playing. At the corner across from her building, a young man sat on a stoop, hood up, head down, as if reading the sidewalk. "Cold out tonight, sunflower," he said, without looking up. Maya climbed the stairs 2 at a time. She locked every bolt. She didn't cry. She sat on the couch and listened to the radiator tick and the city breathe. In the morning, her doormat was flipped. On the underside, someone had written with a pen that bled through the fibers. "You can change your face. I'll still recognize you." Maya booked a hotel for 2 nights, 4th floor, end of the hall. At 2:07 a.m., 3 slow knocks sounded like a metronome practicing patience. Through the peephole, a woman in her 40s, expressionless, eyes unblinking. The woman didn't speak, didn't leave a note, just waited like a program that hadn't yet received its next instruction. Front desk said no one should be on that floor. Every room was empty. Maya lay back in a bed that smelled like bleach and thought, someone has turned me into a scavenger hunt. She pictured a forum, a pipeline of volunteers or clients given lines and timestamps and intersections. Not stalking exactly, but proximity theater. If the goal was to keep her scanning, it worked. She was always searching now, not for him, but for him and other people. The idea should have felt paranoid. Instead, it felt tidy. The following week, as twilight leaked into the city, Maya cut through a bookstore. She bought nothing, just let her fingers trail across spines like railing. On the walk home, a woman brushed past, murmuring, "Still behind books, sunflower." No pause, no glance back. Maya didn't speed up. She kept a steady pace, turned right twice, then stepped into a hardware store and bought a cheap camera, 2 wedge alarms, and a door bar. Back home, she replaced her doormat with a heavy rubber mat, no fibrous underside to write on, and set the alarms where a kick would scream. She recorded the serial numbers, documented everything, then wrote a short email addressed to herself, her boss, and Erin. "If anything happens to me, here is a record of the incidents." At 10:40 p.m., she dialed a number she'd saved for months but never used. Riley Van Dorn, an attorney who ran a side practice helping harassment victims build paper trails. "I think I'm being outsourced," Maya said. "Like, he hired a crowd." Riley didn't laugh. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring dates, places, faces, any footage." That night, the knock came soft and late. Maya took her time approaching the peephole. On the other side stood a man mid-30s, winter cap, eyes placid as water. Evening, he said, his voice almost kind. Ever figure out? Maya pressed the door bar tighter with one hand and hit record on her phone with the other. This interaction is being documented, she said clearly, like she'd practiced. Any future contact will be considered harassment and forwarded to council and police. Leave. A pause. Something flickered in his eyes. Confusion. He hadn't been given lines for this. Wrong door, he said finally and walked away. Maya slumped to the floor and cried for the first time since moving. It wasn't victory. It was a foothold. The next day, Riley skimmed her notes and whistled under her breath. This reads like a forum game, she said. We'll file reports, lock down your info, and look for patterns. These people like structure. We'll disrupt it. On the way home, Maya saw a familiar face. No, not familiar. Assembled. A man with Trent's cadence, Trent's angles of silence. He opened his mouth, then closed it again when his eyes flicked to the phone in Maya's hand. Camera pointed, steady. He moved on. She didn't. Maya took the long way back, past the cafe with the fogged windows. The barista caught her eye, ready for a script. Maya raised her phone just enough. No, she said gently but like a lock turning. Not today. She kept walking, breath fogging white, each step a sentence that belonged to her again. The lake looked like an ocean, iron gray and borderless under a high white sky. The rental house was everything the listing promised. Wide porch, picture windows, a hot tub that steamed in the morning cold. With 18 of them, they needed the extra building, a 2-story garage set back from the dunes, 4 beds up top, a laundry closet on the first floor that rattled when the dryer ran. Layla tried not to wrinkle her nose when they opened the loft door. The place smelled like damp carpet. One bathroom had shag rugs glued to the floor, which felt like a dare. The sheets were a puzzle of old stains and floral ghosts. We're not sleeping on that, said Nikki, the mouthy cousin, arms crossed. We'll wash everything, Layla said. It's fine. The washing machine could only handle 1 set at a time. Layla fell into a rhythm. Down the back stairs with an armful of bedding, swap, up again with a hot, clean bundle. Her cousins, Nikki, Maria, and Z, dozed and scrolled and complained. The kind of complaints that meant everyone still believed the trip would turn out okay. By 2:30, the beds were made, lamp left on. The garage clicked and settled around them. Layla lay awake, scrolling a study guide she knew she wouldn't memorize here. The last dryer load had gone cool. The lake hissed like an infinite whisper. At 3, the first bang hit the garage door below, so heavy it pulsed in Layla's ribs. She held her breath and waited. Her cousins didn't stir. Wind, she told herself. Then came the second, louder. Metal groaned. Layla sat up and watched the doorway glow around the frame. No footsteps, no voices, just the long silence that attends decisions. She stayed still, counting her breaths. 20 minutes later, the third crash shook the building and sent Nikki bolt upright with a curse. You heard that? Layla whispered. All the way through my bones, Nikki said, voice tiny. Layla texted her aunt in the main house. The reply came fast. Stay put. We're coming. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Garage. Their Uncle Javd knocked, and when they opened the door, he wasn't alone. Layla's father stood beside him, jaw tight, 2 older male cousins half-dressed and serious. The men her family called when something needed lifting, or when something needed to be faced. Grab your things, Javd said. You're moving to the main house. What is it? Maria asked. Javd looked toward the dark window and didn't sugarcoat it. Someone's on the property. They crossed the sand in a knot. Inside, the living room bloomed with hushed voices and blankets. Layla's Aunt Sadaf wrung her hands and explained. She'd trailed Javd outside when he went to check. He'd called out, "Hey!" to a figure standing behind the garage. Not hiding, watching. The main house door had slammed shut just then, no wind, no one near it, and Sadaf ran back inside to rouse the men. What did he do when you saw him? Layla asked Javed. Nothing, Javed said. Didn't startle. He wanted to be seen. Javed rubbed his palm like it itched. When I stepped closer, he walked away and... He stopped, searching for the right word, and stopped being there. No crunch on the leaves. No footprints. I checked. Layla's brothers came up from the basement with something pinched between two fingers. A playing card. A Jester. The cartoon face was twisted, smile knifed too wide. There's another one in the garage, Z said quietly. Same card, but worse. Layla stared at the Jester's eyes and felt something cold touch the back of her teeth. She tried to picture a prankster neighbor, a bored local. But she kept returning to that door slam, the way Javed, who never embellished a story in his life, had said stopped being there instead of ran. Nobody slept back in the garage that night. They made a ragged patchwork of beds on the main house floor. At 4 a.m., the lake hissed louder, as if it approved. Chapter 3. The fourth knock on the second night. Layla's mother surrendered her bedroom to the cousins and camped under the front windows on a couch. At 3:58 a.m., the porch boards creaked like a careful foot. Her mother kept her eyes closed, listening. When someone tested the basement door on the lakeside, soft, patient rattles that grew bolder, she rose and moved, deliberate, to avoid waking anyone who couldn't help. By the time she reached the door, the night was empty again. The boys downstairs slept on, unaware of how thin the wood was between them and whatever had tried it. Morning found the family gathered at the table like survivors around a map. They plotted theory and counter-theory, a neighbor who hated short-term rentals, a prowler who saw Layla moving up and down the back stairs doing laundry at night and thought she was alone, a prank too mean to be funny, or something else, something that wore intention like clothing and left no prints. Layla wanted clean answers. She wanted to say the word trespasser and have it behave like a solved equation. Instead, she thought about the Jester cards, the private promise of mockery. 3 heavy booms at 3 a.m., the devil's hour, as her cousin Z whispered too loudly. How the figure didn't hide and didn't hurry and seemed to enjoy being observed. They were supposed to stay until Tuesday. They left on Monday. The host promised to check the camera above the garage, but the family received no follow-up. The silence felt like a complicity they couldn't name. On the drive south, the lake pulled away in the rearview, slate-bright and arrogant with distance. "Do you think he picked us?" Nikki asked from the back seat, chewing a nail. Layla watched the road spool out and thought of that first night easing sheet after sheet into the washer like covering a small body with warm cloth. "I think he waited," she said. "And I think we said yes without knowing. Lights on. Doors not as strong as we believed." Her mother reached back until her hand found Layla's knee, warm through denim. "We said no when it mattered," she said. "We left." Layla nodded but kept her eyes on the tree line, where sun and shadow shuffled like cards. For weeks after, her dreams would arrive already laughing. The Jester's grin stitched into the fabric of the woods, the water, the thin doors between sleep and waking. But in the dream's end, she always stood and moved her people, one by one, into a brighter house, and the lake's hiss fell away like a curtain. They'd make another trip someday, not there. But somewhere the door frames were thick, and the night, when it knocked, learned the sound of a family refusing.